how you sigh like an earthquake. No blisters on my hands. I refuse to take a stand. I'm tired of being emotional.
Hello, I'm Jo Faustgen. I'll be presenting for you today, Emotions in the Brain. Welcome to our monthly webinar series. This month, we'll be looking into the very intriguing and wonderful world of our emotions, as well as looking at the very complex parts of the brain that are involved in that. Again, I have compiled for you material from classes that I have taken from Vanderbilt and Duke universities. And we'll also be looking at the material that was popularized in the 1990s by a very renowned specialist in DBT, Dr. Marshall Linehan. We'll be exploring some interesting questions today. How do we feel our emotions? Is it very simple or is it very complex? What are the brain changes in anxiety, depression, and PTSD? Do our emotions help us in decision making? Do we even need them? And how can we regulate our emotions using our DBT skills? So let's get started. We're going to need to do a lot of exploring here. As humans, we have a whole wide variety of emotions that we can express. And that's what makes us uniquely human. You look at the wild animals that are maybe even just the little ones that are out in our backyard, like the squirrels that I see in our garden. You know, they're driven by instinct, and they seem to be having anger at times where they're switching their tails back and forth, and they're guarding their territory because that's, you know, where they live and that's where they have their food. But our emotions are quite different. We are not driven by instinct. We actually have the capability to control our emotions. At least at times we do, but we do have that capability. And we have a much more developed higher order system in our brains that help us to do that. So we are not only instinct, we are made of many different parts. Our feelings are subjective, okay, and that's what makes us unique. There's no real objective measure for our feelings like blood pressure, but the blood pressure and the objective measures like heart rate that we can measure, they're connected. And there's many different areas of the brain that contribute to this. There's the limbic system, which we talked about last month, which is where a lot of our emotions are processed. And then there's the executive function of the upper parts of the brain. It's not a simple path like the pain was. We know last time when I talked about pain management, and we looked at the parts of the brain that are involved in pain. The pain path is relatively simple. In other words, you prick your finger and that goes all the way back to the spinal cord and up to the thalamus and up to the part of the cortex where the sensory part is, and you feel the pain and you sense the pain. This is quite different. There's many different areas that are contributing to this, and we're going to be exploring that. And our feelings are based on a lot of memories that we have in the past, the experiences we've had, and even the traumas that we've had. So I'm going to use as an example, the word piano to me brings up an immediate anxiety response. And there's a reason for that. Back when I was little in grade school, I took 6 years of piano, and what I remember from that mostly is the recitals. And I was so anxious during those recitals. I wanted to do my best, but the anxiety was just so immense in me, and it was really hard for me to do that. So even now, just the word piano brings up those old memories for me, okay? Whereas for other people, the word piano may be a very, relaxing thought. Okay, piano music for them, actually to play the piano for some people is an artistic expression, and they can relax as they do that. That's not the way I have experienced it, but what I found out is that I think I have a new pathway that I'm forming in my brain, because I am able now to listen to piano music that other people are playing and actually relax. So if I hear classical piano now, I can relax and enjoy that. Whereas before I couldn't do that when I was playing it myself. I was so involved in trying to get my my different notes right, and I had to get it right. So that was so hard for me. But now I think I formed some new synapses. I'm actually learning how to do that differently. And that's just one of the wonderful things about our brain, is that we can form new pathways that can help us more. And so our emotions are made up of 3 different components. The physiological changes in our body, the body changes that are objective, such as blood pressure, heart rate, things like that. And then there's our feelings that are subjective. Then there's the behavior, the motor behavior that we have, that other people see and we can actually see that we're doing, okay? And so it's a whole emotional system that we have between the body response, the feelings that we have, and then the behavior that we do. So let's start with the feelings in the middle. So I might feel anxious, scared, or even angry, and my heart rate and my blood pressure may be going up. And what I might actually do with that is attack somebody verbally or physically. Or I might walk away. I might do something because of that, okay? Or the same body response might be happening in my body when I'm surprised, like on a birthday party, when somebody gives me a present and I was happily surprised and I want to jump up and say, thank you, thank you. And I get all excited and I want to call a friend. My heart rate is going and my blood pressure is up. So whether you feel the feeling first or you have the body response first, we don't really know. Okay. Sometimes it's one or the other, or maybe they happen simultaneously. And then maybe the next feeling that is on the chart here. You might feel relaxed and your heart rate goes down, and then your blood pressure actually is going down. And you might fall asleep, or you might be depressed. Your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure goes down, and you might feel totally unmotivated and you still might sleep. Okay. Let's look at the next one. If I'm embarrassed, I've made a mistake, okay, I oftentimes can feel the blood rushing to my face and I blush, okay. I may not know it until I actually feel that blush, but that's what's been happening. Okay, and I might actually verbalize that as an apology. Okay, so there's systems that work together. We may not even be conscious of the fact that we're feeling that feeling or having that body response. It's an amazing system that we may not even be aware of at the time. And then there's other behaviors. Our face is so expressive. And so even if you're wearing a mask these days, the eyes are very expressive. The eyes say so much about us. Okay, you've heard of the Duchenne smile. That's the smile where we have not only our smile from our mouth, but there's the muscles around our eyes are actually contracting. So the Duchenne smile might look like this. I'm smiling with my eyes. Those muscles are called orbicularis oris. Try to say that one 10 times fast. Orbicularis oris. And that Duchenne smile is one that has actually been found to increase the endorphin level in our body. We can feel better because we're smiling. Isn't that something? The eyebrows also are very expressive in facial expressions. So in surprise, I might raise my eyebrows like this, or in fear, I might raise my eyebrows too. The pupil size might increase when I'm afraid or excited. The eyes might be wide open when I'm interested, or partially open when I'm sad or depressed or sleepy. Okay. And then there's voice inflection, which is very interesting. Take the word gym. Okay, I can say the word gym, one syllable, in a number of ways. And so I could say it in an excited way, Jim, or I could say it in a very frustrated way, Jim, or I could say it angry, Jim. Okay? Notice how the smile goes away. Notice how the eyes are very expressive. And then there's the nonverbals, which are the hands, finger pointing, hands on your hips, feet stomping. You can't see my feet, but I'm stomping. Okay? I'm walking away, body stance, intimidating, or depressed, low self-esteem, and you're just kind of diminutive. All kinds of behaviors that we have can also express our emotions. And our emotions are coming from our limbic system, very deep within our brain. Okay, let's start on the left-hand side of this slide, the ones that are highlighted, the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the part of our brain that is involved in memory storage. And memory storage, as well as the plasticity of the brain, is very apparent in this system. It is the most plastic or flexible, let's say, in the brain. In other words, remember that example I gave you about piano, okay? That's plasticity. That's our brain can form new memories, new meanings to old memories. Then there's the amygdala. See that light purple area there? The amygdala is very involved in what's called fear conditioning. And we're going to see that in a minute in another slide. It's also involved when you're very anxious, when you're panicky, or when you're very angry. Have you ever felt when you're angry that you're actually very fearful underneath? And you might look at the example of a mother who sees her child running out in the street. And she yells at her child, Jimmy, get out of the street. And it looks to the child like she's very angry, but she's really very afraid. She doesn't want her child getting run over in the street. Okay, so anger and fear can be linked. So the amygdala is very much about those emotions. Then there's the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is involved in different systems, the automatic systems in the body, the autonomic systems. It's involved in metabolism and making sure that the metabolism and the different things like respiration and heart rate are balanced. So it's the homeostasis of the body that's involved there. And then there's the cingulate gyrus. The cingulate gyrus is involved in learning from the consequences of our behavior. So say someone gets drunk and they smash up their car and they get a DWI because the police pull them over, do the breathalyzer test, take them to jail, and they decide after that, maybe I shouldn't drink and drive at the same time. So they're learning from the consequences of their behavior. They're using their cingulate gyrus. That's good. That's a good system. And then there's the thalamus right in the middle. The thalamus is the relay station involved in so many different parts of the brain. So a lot of systems go up to the thalamus, and the thalamus takes those synapses up to where they need to go. Very important system, our limbic system. And then there's the amygdala. The amygdala itself is very interesting. Look at how small it is, okay? But that is so involved in so many different things. When I do my anger management group, I talk about all your emotions are going into the little tiny pea-sized area of the brain. Your synapses aren't going up to the cortex of the brain where your executive functions are, where your decision making and your emotion control is. It's all in that one little part of your brain. And there's ways to get out of that. So next month I'll be talking about anger management. I'm hoping you're going to join me for that. And then the amygdala and fear conditioning, I want to share with you a story that kind of pinpoints this. And so sit back for a minute as I describe this that happened to me about 20 years ago. I was in an accident in a car where I was a passenger. I was going through the 94 tunnel. And all of a sudden, we heard this screech coming from behind us. This car, we found out later, was going about 100 miles an hour, going through the tunnel. As we were coming out of the tunnel, it was coming out. It hit the meridian, and it spun around, and it backed up onto our car and hit the windshield. And of course, I close my eyes when anything like this is happening. I opened my eyes in shock and saw that the windshield was shattered and the glass was in my lap. I was in total shock. The next thing I remember hearing is the siren of the police coming to investigate. And for a whole year after that, any siren that I heard, I was immediately thrown into this panic, this anxiety, this fear. And I remembered that incident that happened. So this is what's happening. That siren is going into both of our ears, and it's going up through the brainstem. The thalamus is hitting the auditory cortex, which is in the side of the brain. It's going into the middle part of the brain, the amygdala, where the fear, panic, and anxiety is hitting. Was there some post-traumatic stress disorder happening? Very possibly, because I could feel that in my body a whole year after. Okay? Very interesting how all of this is connected. And so PTSD, what we found out now is that there's actually a functional impairment in that amygdala. There's a hyperarousal to cues that you've previously seen as a threat, like that screech of the car, or even, I didn't even want to go through that tunnel for a whole year. It's an exaggerated response to that threat that you perceive. It may not even be a threat a year from that accident or whatever, but you can feel in your body, you're perceiving it as a threat. I remember being on my couch in my living room and I was trying to sleep and I could still hear that siren. It was a perceived threat. It was not an actual threat. And so you have difficulty when you have PTSD and you have that immediate response to something in your immediate environment, which may not be anywhere related to what happened. You have a very hard time suppressing your fears. You have a hard time suppressing your emotions at that time. You start re-experiencing because it's looping through your limbic system. And you may not even be aware that you're doing this, but it's something that you feel like you can't control. You have these intense body reactions to those similar cues. And you have even negative beliefs and mood changes. PTSD is something we're still exploring at this point. There's no real cure for it, but there can be helps for it with therapy. So we're going to change up at this point and talk about depression in the brain. Depression is very interesting. It's very complex. There's no one pathway. There's no one part of the brain that experiences depression. But what we do know is that there's an abnormal blood flow in the higher order complex of the orbital prefrontal cortex, which we will see in just a minute, and the amygdala and the thalamus. This triangular system, abnormal amounts of blood flow there, as well as there's low activation in the left frontal lobe that we have in our brain, which is actually our happy lobe. Isn't that interesting? We have a happy lobe and a sad lobe. The left frontal lobe is where we experience more of our happy emotions. And so we found that in depression, there's a low activation in that. It's not that there's a hyperarousal where there's the sad part of the brain, where the sad emotions are experienced, but it's a low activation in the happy part of the brain. This is the way it is. Okay. Depression, we have not found the actual cause of it because it is so complex. We're still looking into it. We do know that it is mostly likely inherited because it oftentimes is something as we take a history when we're doing therapy and we ask, you know, is there anybody else in your family who's been depressed? Yes, my mother, my father, my grandfather, my sister, my brother, whatever. Okay. We do know that it's possibly neurochemical. There is now a theory called the biogenic amine theory of depression, in which we think it involves the monoamine system of neurotransmitters in the brain. These are especially the dopamines and the serotonins. We do know because some medications, the SSRIs that increase the serotonin in the brain, we do know that these seem to help some people. And that's why we think that this is the theory that is most appropriate at this point. But it's still only a theory. In the future, we may find out differently. But right now, we think that this is the best way to treat depression, which is giving people SSRIs, but also doing therapy. As I've gone to many different brain seminars, they talk about the fact that doing medication plus therapy at the same time is the best way to work with depression as well as anxiety. And so we can work in tandem with our body. And so let's look a little bit more at the thinking parts of the brain, the higher order parts of the brain. This is a very interesting and intriguing slide here that I found on the internet. It links the limbic brain with the prefrontal cortex, which is where lots of higher order functions are. Let's start with the limbic brain. We've talked about the PTSD, the fight or flight response. Fight, flight, or freeze, okay? Kind of like a rabbit who freezes, okay? It's also where that safety part is, that panic, am I safe? And that's where most of those emotions live, in that inner part of the brain. But then there's the linkage to the prefrontal cortex that we think is very, very important. Look at the 9 functions that are listed here. Empathy for someone else, okay? Insight into how you are thinking and how you are acting, and if you should act that way. The flexibility of your responses, your motor responses, the regulation of both emotion and body, and the morality. It links the mores of your culture. It links the beliefs that you have that are very strong in you with your emotions. And it modulates the fear that you have. And so how important it is that these two are actually connected. And how do we know that? Well, there's a very important example coming up here. As we look at the different parts in our brain that are needed for good decisions. We look at the prefrontal cortex that we were just looking at, the planning and organization of behavior in that part, but also in the orbitofrontal cortex, which is on the very bottom part of that prefrontal cortex. So you're evaluating your options, the pros and cons of your decisions. It helps you to control your impulses. It helps you to incorporate your ethics in your behavior. It helps you to work on your social conduct, how you deal with other people. Very important parts of your brain. And so this is the example. I don't know if you've heard of Phineas Gage or not, but this is a very important part that neuroscientists and neurophysiologists learned about the brain. And this is kind of a gross picture, but I'm sure you've probably seen grosser pictures in movies and on the internet. But this is very important example. So sit back as I kind of explain this about Phineas Gage. So this happened in 1848. This man was a railroad foreman. He was a dynamite worker, an explosives expert. And so what they did back then to get the railroad through the rock and the mountain is that they had to use explosives to get through. And so what they did back then is that they dug a hole and they put explosive powder in that hole in the ground. And they had to use this big long rod to tamp it down. And at one particular point, there was some sparks that came from this tamping, and it ignited that explosive powder, and it thrust that rod up through his cheek, behind his eyes, and up into the frontal lobe. And of course, it destroyed the frontal lobe. He survived this. I don't know how. He actually did not even lose consciousness. How is that possible? I sure would have lost my consciousness, but he did not. And it's amazing what they were able to learn from this. Of course, he got a terrible infection from the rod going through his brain, and that destroyed the rest of his frontal lobe. But what they found out is that he totally changed after this. Before, he was a very well-known, well-respected foreman in the railroad business. He was liked by his family and his friends. He was very kind and thoughtful to people. After this accident, he became nasty and angry and fitful, and nobody seemed to like him. He lost his friends, he lost his job. He couldn't make decisions anymore that were good for the job. And so, of course, he would lose his job. He actually became homeless. He was not able to hold on a job, and it's just a very sad situation. But what they did find out from this is they learned a lot about the frontal lobe and what it did, that it combined and helped to utilize the emotional part of the body as well as the executive functions. And so once that's damaged, you lose those parts of both the systems. And so it's an important piece to look at how we can use both of those to help us. Okay. And on a lighter note, we're going to start going into how we can control our emotions and use our executive functions to help us. So in using dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, as Dr. Linehan talked about and developed, we're going to talk about how to do our emotion regulation, how to do distress tolerance, how to be an effective communicator, and how to use our mindfulness. You may have done some background work on mindfulness, and this is coming from Zen philosophy, it's very helpful in using to be able to control our emotions and to work with our body in a different way. And so the first principle is core mindfulness. And so as we look at our emotional mind and our anxiety and our anger and our happiness and all of those pieces are of our emotional mind. And then there's the rational mind and how important that is to make good decisions. But we need to combine them. We need to use them both together to make wise decisions, to look at the pros and the cons, as well as what we want to do and what we think we want to do. So this comes into play when I do marriage counseling, and I talk with a lady who may really love this man, and she is just so much in love with him and she wants to marry him. But she realizes that he's got a drinking problem and he treats women terribly and he keeps having affairs. And so if she was using her wise mind, she might be thinking, maybe this isn't such a good choice for me, even though I really want to do this. Maybe I need to look at the rational sense of this might not be a good decision for me. And so we use mindfulness theory in lots of different ways. So mindfulness theory has these parts to it where you observe and you describe and you become non-judgmental. So I'm going to use the example of having mild pain and just trying to let it kind of float through my body, kind of like a cloud. Okay, it's kind of floating through. I'm experiencing the pain. I know I have the pain. I'm saying, I feel the pain. I'm really sad that I have this pain. I'm kind of frustrated that I keep having it for day after day, but I'm really going to try not to entertain it. I'm not going to try to really get into those emotions. I'm just going to let it be. It just is. And so in observing without evaluating, I'm going to try not to label it as terrible. This is terrible that I keep having this pain. No, I'm going to say to myself, I'm just going to let it be. It just is. And I've tried that with my mild pain with headaches or my arthritis and just tried to let it be. And it does seem to help, okay? And it's also helpful in other situations. Say you fall down the stairs and it was an accident, but you don't need to blame yourself or somebody else. It just happened, okay? So you just let it be, okay? Or I had to use this system when I kind of had to let go of my pride and my anger when I was in chemo and I lost my hair. I had to lose that whole sense of hair isn't all of me, okay? It just is. I still have me. I had to let that go. I had to just let it be. That was helpful back then. And then another core part of mindfulness theory and DBT is interpersonal effectiveness. How important it is to be able to effectively communicate with other people. And that's another part that I work with other people in therapy about, how important that is. So DBT uses these wonderful acronyms. The first one is GIVE. So the G is for gentleness, to be gentle. Or as John and Julie Gottman talk about, to have a soft startup, to be gentle with each other, to be interested, to use your face to be expressive and to be interested in that person, to validate that person and to smile and have an easy manner. Those are all good ways to have that communication with other people. And then another acronym is Dear Man. Describe with details, maybe not too many details, maybe not go on and on and on, maybe just enough details so that you are able to express your emotions. You're able to express what happened and how you feel, and to be assertive, to be respectfully assertive and ask for what you need, or maybe even ask questions of the other person. What do you mean by that? How can I help you a little bit more? So you're asking. You're also asking for reinforcement. You reinforce yourself with rewards. I did a good job in talking with that person. I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to give myself, a little treat because I did a good job with that. Because it's been so hard to talk to that person, okay? And to be mindful as you talk with people, mindful about what's going on with them. Use that empathy that you've got to appear confident, okay? And to negotiate with people, to cooperate with people, to work with people. How important all of those things are when you're working with other people. So interpersonal effectiveness can be very helpful. Another core concept in DBT is emotion regulation. And one of the very core concepts that people remember is opposite to emotion. And so I need maybe to act as if I'm happy when I'm sad. When I'm sad and down, and maybe I've had some grief in my life, either because of COVID and I can't relate with people like I wanted to. But if I actually act happy, if I put on that Duchenne smile, I can actually start the endorphins going in my body and I can feel happier. Isn't that amazing? I can actually feel happier when I act happy. So acting as if, yes, you're kind of acting, but you're acting in a good way. You're not just pretending. You're putting on that persona. You can actually, maybe you've actually done this when you're doing a workout and you're getting really fatigued and you don't know if you can make it the next 5 minutes. And you say, I'm going to put on that energetic me. I'm going to make myself do it. So you act energetic and you kind of push yourself through it. That's acting as if you're acting opposite to the emotion that you felt. Another core concept in DBT is distress tolerance. How important that is for all of us to work on that. And to do that is distracting. And so she uses the acronym of ACCEPTS. So ACCEPTS, accept, to use activities to help us. So I'm sure you've probably done this. To get away from your distress, maybe you have used your activities. You've watched a movie, you've watched a series of TV shows to de-stress. You have maybe gotten out and done some activities with some other friends, gone to eat, get some takeout, whatever you need to do. Doing something helps you to distract from your distress. Contributing in maybe even just small ways, whether that's that smile for somebody, or it's maybe opening a door for somebody, acts of kindness, small acts of kindness, helping somebody out when they need just a listening time from you. To make good comparisons with yourself, with maybe times when things were so bad for you and now things are better. And you compare those times and you say, I'm glad they're better for me at this point. And that can actually lead to a gratefulness list. And what I encourage people to do is 3 blessings at the end of the day. You're telling yourself, I'm going to find those 3 good things that happened in my life that I can kind of bank on right now. And you use your emotions in a positive way. You push yourself into positive emotions. You're pushing away the catastrophic thinking and those thoughts that don't help you. And you're using your sensations to help you. Maybe even using, taking a hot shower and saying, oh, this feels so relaxing. Or you're using your smell, you're baking cookies and you're thinking of, oh, that smell of the chocolate cookies smells so good, and it just kind of relaxes people. Or aromatherapy, and you're smelling that lavender and chamomile. Oh, that just smells so good. And you're distracting from your distress. Okay? Wonderful ways to help you. And how important it is to self-soothe. Giving yourself the gift of time. Giving yourself the time to grieve if you need to. Giving yourself the time to heal from all those hurts in your past. The time to soothe those hurts in your heart. So whether that's you need to take a break at work, just a couple minutes to take a breath and allow your system to calm down. Or maybe you need to do some yoga or take some time out and go to the chiropractor and maybe even go to the massage therapist and relax those muscles down. Take time to self-soothe. And so we've talked about a lot today in emotions in the brain. We've talked about how complex and subjective our feelings are and how all those components need to work together. We've talked a little bit about anxiety, PTSD, and depression, and how interesting they are and complex and different they are. And we've talked about the different systems, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex and the executive systems in the brain and how they need to work out together. We've talked about DBT concepts, how all those different systems, the mindfulness and the distracting and the interpersonal effectiveness, how they can help us in working through our emotions and helping us to make good, positive, wise mind decisions. And so as we look at all of those different emotions that we can have, as we use our humor and our emotions to help us go through life, I hope that this has helped you to have a little bit more insight into them. I hope it's been a good exploration for you. I thank you for enjoying me, and I hope you will join me next month for anger management, one of the specialties that I have. And I thank you once again for joining me. Take care and be safe.